All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Minister, officials, committee members. Welcome. My name is Ken Cheveldayoff, and I'll serve as your chair this afternoon. Other members of the committee are Stephen Bonk, Fred Bradshaw, Noor Burki, Terry Jensen, Dana Scorpad, and Doyle Vermette. Today, Trent Weatherspoon will be substituting in for Doyle Vermette. Daryl Harrison is here for Fred Bradshaw, and Matt Love is here for Noor Burki. Today, the committee will be considering the 2024-25 estimates and the 2023-24 supplementary estimates for vote number two, for vote 13, Sask Builds and Procurement, and the 2024-25 estimates for vote 86, Sask Builds Corporation. We will begin with vote 13, Sask Builds and Procurement, Central Management and Services, subvote SP01. Minister Hargrave is here with his officials. I will remind officials to identify themselves before they speak and not to touch the microphones. The handset operator will turn them on for you. Minister Hargrave, please make your opening comments and introduce your officials.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to be here to present the estimates for the Ministry of Sask Builds and Procurement for the year 24-25. Joining me today are Deputy Minister Denise Mazga, Chief Financial Officer Mark Cleafield, Assistant Deputy Minister Infrastructure Design and Delivery Sarah Nichols, Assistant Deputy Minister of Operations and Service Delivery Jill Zimmer, Chief Procurement Officer Karen Cossett, Executive Director of Operations and Infrastructure for the Information Technology Division Blake Fleischecker, Executive Director of Corporate Finance, Hera Kang, Executive Director of Information Security, Fawad Idrusu, and last but certainly not least, my Chief of Staff, Sean Wilson. I think I got everybody here, pretty much. Anybody else will have to identify themselves when they come to the microphone, and everybody will get a chance. This is my first year presenting the estimates for our ministry, and I want to thank them for joining me here today and also for the work they do throughout the year. SBP is where infrastructure and centralized services meet to support government in advancing its growth agenda, which means it plays a unique role in supporting the investments made through this year's budget. The ministry provides central coordination and delivery of property management, information technology, procurement, project management, transportation, and other support services to government ministries and agencies. In collaboration with Sask Builds Corporation, the ministry integrates, coordinates, and prioritizes infrastructure planning and delivery for the province of Saskatchewan and advances projects through contract oversight, innovative approaches, and alternative financing models as appropriate. Since becoming minister last August, I've learned how important it is to have a single organization in government that brings these functions together. For example, about one of the most important things any government can do, building infrastructure. Every school, hospital, health center, and long-term care center that we fund requires planning, design, procurement, construction, and commissioning before it can open to serve the community it's built in. The Sask Builds and Procurement is involved at every stage, and that ensures continuity throughout each project's life cycle. And that's a very good thing indeed, because this year's budget delivers the largest total capital budget in Saskatchewan history, the largest Crown Corporation capital budget in Saskatchewan's history, and the largest executive government capital budget in Saskatchewan's history. Budget 24-25 is investing an all-time high $4.4 billion in capital projects this fiscal year to support classrooms, care, and communities, and meet the growing needs of our province and the families who call Saskatchewan home. This record capital funding is part of nearly $18 billion that will be invested over the next 4 years. I'm happy to inform the committee that thanks to this year's record investments in infrastructure, we are on track to exceed our growth plan goal of investing $30 billion in infrastructure by 2030. I would also like to share that this year's capital plan funding means our government has now invested approximately $47.2 billion since 2008-2009 to meet the growing infrastructure needs of Saskatchewan families and communities. The 24-25 capital plan provides approximately $2.6 billion in capital projects by Crown corporations and nearly $1.9 billion in capital projects across executive government. I'd like to spend some time on the executive government portion of the capital plan today. That's because our ministry not only coordinates the capital planning for executive government, but the ministry also leads the planning and development of projects in several sectors in collaboration with other ministries and sector partners. The first of these sectors is health. This year's capital plan includes the largest investment ever made in health capital in Saskatchewan's history, more than $516.8 million. This represents an increase of nearly $180 million compared to the previous year. This record investment will support a number of ongoing major projects, including $180 million for construction of the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital redevelopment project, $55 million for construction of the Weyburn General Hospital replacement project, $27 million for construction of the LaRange long-term care home project, $21.9 million to complete construction of the Regina General Hospital Parkade project, $20 million to support procurement and design activities on the Regina long-term care specialized beds project, $10 million for construction of the Grenfell long-term care home, $3 million to continue work on Saskatoon Urgent Care Centre, $2.8 million for the St. Paul's front entrance expansion project, $2.5 million to advance the Estevan long-term care redevelopment project, $1.5 million to advance the Watson long-term care project, $1 million for planning for the Yorkton Regional Health Centre replacement project, and $750,000 to advance planning on various projects including St. Anthony's Hospital in Esterhazy, Rosthern Hospital, and the Battlefords District Care Centre. The Government of Saskatchewan has invested more than $2.9 billion to support the maintenance and construction of new healthcare facilities since 2008-2009. The next sector I would like to highlight for the committee is the education sector, where this year's budget is investing $216 million in school infrastructure. This includes $165.9 million to support ongoing projects, including 11 new or consolidated school projects and 3 major renovations in Lanigan, Carlisle, La Loche, Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, Regina, Prince Albert, Balgony, and Wilcox, and $28.5 million for the relocatable classroom program to support enrollment growth. $8.8 million in funding to begin planning for 9 new schools and 2 renovations, including Minahakik-Wakaki High School replacement in Pine House, new Regina East Joint Use Facility for a public and Catholic elementary school, new Saskatoon East Joint Use Facility for a public and Catholic high school, South Corman Park renovation, Swift Current Comprehensive High School renovation, new Regina East Joint Use Facility for a public and Catholic high school pre-planning, and new Saskatoon East Joint Use Facility for a public and Catholic elementary school pre-planning. $12.8 million for minor capital renewal projects that allow school divisions to address structural repairs and renovations to prolong the life of schools across the province. I'm happy to say that the Government of Saskatchewan has committed approximately $2.6 billion towards school capital since 2008-09. This includes 69 new schools, 32 major renovation projects, and 7 projects approved through the Minor Capital Renewal Program. This year's budget also invests $59 million in post-secondary infrastructure. This includes $24.6 million for maintenance and upgrades to help meet the needs of students and staff, $8.7 million for an electrical and mechanical infrastructure upgrade at the U of S, $7.8 million to support new domestic health care training programs, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, and physician assistant programs, $6.3 million for a cooling tower replacement at U of R, $6 million for planning for work for Saskatchewan Polytech's new Saskatoon campus, $3.5 million for further expansion in healthcare training programs, and $610,000 to expand the Student Healthcare Center at the University of Regina. This means that our government has now committed more than $839.7 million in post-secondary infrastructure across the province since 2008-2009. This budget also invests $301.9 million in government services infrastructure, including $78.9 million in various water-related infrastructure programs, $60.8 million for courts and correctional facilities and equipment, including continued construction of the remand expansion at the Saskatoon Correctional Centre, $21.7 million for the development of supportive housing spaces in Regina and Saskatoon, and to repair and maintain, replace provincially owned housing units, and $13.1 million for capital projects through the park system to improve visitor experience, including construction of a new service center at Nut Point Campground in Lac La Ronge Provincial Park. Improvements and upgrades will also take place at Pike Lake, Narrow Hills, Moose Mountain, Rowan's Ravine, and Crooked Lake Provincial Parks, as well as Cypress Hills Interprovincial Park. The 24-25 capital plan also includes $417.3 million in transportation infrastructure through the Ministry of Highways and $350.1 million in transfers to municipalities for infrastructure projects through several programs, including the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Canada Community Building Fund, and the New Building Canada Fund. And now I'd like to provide an overview of what this year's budget means for our ministry's operations overall. This is by and large a status quo budget for SAS Bills and Procurement, where we will continue to stay the course on our existing core activities in support of government priorities. As a central agency, SAS Bills and Procurement is funded in two ways. First, we have an expense budget made up of funding appropriated directly to our ministry that is used to support our own operations. The second way we are funded is through revenues recovered from clients. This funding is appropriated to our clients' ministries, which we then recover from them for some of our services. Overall this year, the ministry is budgeted to spend $887.2 million and will recover $730.4 million from client ministries for services provided. The ministry expense budget is $73.5 million, an increase of $6 million of just under 9%. The ministry's capital funding for 24-25 is $84.6 million, an increase of $23.7 million or 39%. This year's total appropriated budget for the ministry is $156.8 million. This is an increase of $21.64 million or 16%. As the committee will know, SAS Bills and Procurement was created to oversee a new approach to the management of all infrastructure projects and assets, standardized government procurement and IT infrastructure, as well as support several important long-term government commitments that are set out in Saskatchewan's growth plan. Investing more than $30 billion over the next decade to build the infrastructure to support a growing province, a stronger economy, and a better quality of life for Saskatchewan people. Delivering a modern approach to IT service delivery and procurement, and leveraging government procurement and supply chains to support the development and growth of Saskatchewan businesses. As a central agency, SAS Bills and Procurement also supports our clients and partners as they work to deliver their programs and services to achieve many of the other goals set out in the growth plan. Our Procurement Management Division conducts all procurements above trade thresholds for the goods and services, business and technology solutions, and construction that our client ministries across government need to serve citizens and communities. They also maintain communication with industry and stakeholders to ensure that the Government of Saskatchewan procurements ensure best value for taxpayers and fair treatment for Saskatchewan suppliers. During 23-24, the Procurement Management Division was involved in awarding over 750 procurements valued at approximately $991 million. Approximately 89.6% of those procurements, valued at $888 million, were awarded to Saskatchewan-based companies. Our procurement team also works hard to ensure that the Government of Saskatchewan's procurement comply with our province's obligation under the various treaty agreements Saskatchewan has signed onto, including the New West Partnership Trade Agreement, Canada Free Trade Agreement, the Canada-European Union Trade Agreement, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, and the World Trade Organization Agreement. Trade compliance is a key priority because not only does it ensure our province isn't penalized in accordance with the provisions of these agreements, it also helps establish a more level playing field for Saskatchewan companies and suppliers to do business outside of our province. Of course, it's almost impossible to discuss procurement these days without acknowledging that the global supply chain continues to be subject of volatility due to geographical uncertainty and trade disruptions. This results in a lack of reliability and predictability on both production of goods and materials and the timeliness of delivery. This volatility and uncertainty in upstream material and component availability for certain items is leading to lengthy delays and budget pressures in project delivery. Some factors driving the supply chain disruption resulting in cost increases are inability to source base materials, inability to source value-added components, significantly higher freight costs due to limited global freight carrier availability to meet demand, delays in custom points, and domestic shipping and warehousing capacity. Saskatchewan is not immune to these challenges, but neither are we alone in facing them. We know that other provinces and territories are facing similar challenges, and we continue to connect with our colleagues in other jurisdictions to share information, learn from each other's experiences, and seek solutions together where we can. For example, new vehicle manufacturers have experienced significant production delays and supply shortages since the COVID-19 pandemic. Through the New West Partnership, our ministry's central agency and colleagues in other participating provinces of Alberta, British Columbia, and Manitoba have reached out to manufacturers to discuss efficient ways to receive and procure vehicles based on manufacturers' build schedules. Leveraging the New West Partnership and working together has established a continuous supply of vehicles. However, that there have been overall supply shortages due to shortage of key components. The supply shortage has resulted in increased vehicle prices over the last several years, which may continue through 2024. We're also seeing a high demand for construction service vehicles or services nationwide. While we are very excited that Saskatchewan continues to attract major private sector investments across multiple sectors, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that the demand for construction services may result in continued elevated prices due to limited labor capacity and high demand for construction materials. We will continue to work with industry to ensure that the coming public sector investments do not result in adding increased supply chain pressures, potential labor shortages, and extended project timelines. This includes taking a collaborative approach and leveraging industry expertise to identify potential short and long-term solutions, including sharing more robust information regarding project timelines and procurement, releasing dates with Saskatchewan industry, working with industry to source or allow alternative materials or processes where possible to alleviate supply challenges, monitoring inflationary pressures and changes in cost of materials and labor availability, and working with client and partner ministries and industry stakeholders to identify opportunities for flexibility with our procurement and delivery approaches. As part of the annual capital plan development process, SAS Bills and Procurement also works with ministries, agencies, Treasury Crown Board partners, and the SAS Bills Board to identify options for strategic public sector projects in construction in the coming years to ensure economic recovery is sustained into the future. Sadly, there's another equally important challenge that Saskatchewan is not immune from: cyber threats and attacks. Cyber attacks are constantly evolving, becoming more intense, more frequent, and more sophisticated. As the IT provider for the government of Saskatchewan, it is our ministry's responsibility to do everything we can to protect government systems, information, data, as well as the information entrusted to us by the public. The Ministry of SAS Bills and Procurement is leading a one government approach to cybersecurity by collaborating with government agencies, boards, and crowns to improve information sharing, coordinate responses, enhance protection, and improve public trust in government's ability to address cyber risk security. In 24-25, SAS Bills and Procurement will continue to invest $3.2 million into cybersecurity initiatives. Excuse me. As cyber threats continue to increase in quantity and complexity, SAS Bills and Procurements is committed to proactive approach to protect information and manage risk. Excuse me. As the number of cyber criminals and the nature of their attacks continue to grow and evolve, our ministry will continue to learn and improve ourselves to meet this challenge as part of our commitment to our clients, across government, and to the public. Another key way we support both our government, clients, and members to the public is through the safe, reliable, and professional management of government buildings, facilities, properties through our Operations and Service Delivery Division. Our minister operates and maintains hundreds of government-owned and leased properties in dozens of communities across Saskatchewan that are used by client ministries to provide programs and services to citizens. This division includes the Saskatchewan Air Ambulance Service, which provides province-wide emergency medical evacuation 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. SAS Bills and Procurement owns and operates a fleet of 4 King Air 200 aircraft. While the medical service is administered by Saskatchewan Health Authority, the Air Ambulance Service conducts approximately 1,500 patient transfers per year and flies approximately 1 million kilometers each year. This division also provides transportation services through the CVA, as well as mail and telecommunication services. Our ministry also provides funding for the Provincial Archives of Saskatchewan. $4.3 million is included in the budget to protect and preserve Saskatchewan's rich history through funding of Provincial Archives of Saskatchewan this year. Mr. Chair, I would now be happy to take questions about the ministry's estimates for 24-25. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Mr. Weatherspoon, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for your brief remarks here this afternoon. I want to thank all the officials that have joined us here today, all the leadership for SAS Builds and all those that are involved in the work that we'll be discussing here this afternoon. Can you list, Minister, the crowns and ministries you're responsible for providing the tendering and procurement services for? And it might be easier just which ministries and crowns you're not responsible for.
Yes, we'll say the ones that we don't provide service for, and that would be any of the Crown Investments Corporation crowns and the Treasury Board crowns. We, if asked, we would provide advice, but we don't control them.
And that list includes the SHA, correct?
Correct.
Are there any exceptions, any instances where the ministries and crowns provide the tendering and procurement services on an exception basis, or where you provide them on an exception basis for the crowns?
As far as the crowns go, no, we don't. Now we have, on occasion, I think one occasion, provided advice to the Water Security Agency, but really only if asked we provide advice, but we don't provide a service for them.
What about with the ministries that you're providing this, that you provide the service for right across the ministries? Are there exceptions where they would, or instances where they would deliver those services themselves?
Chase, get the real person.
Good afternoon. My name's Karen Cossett. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer. And in response to that question, I think that, well, sorry, just one moment.
Sure. So the question is, are there exceptions where a ministry delivers, or instances where they procure those services handle tendering themselves? And if there are, could you provide a list of the specific procurement pieces where the ministry delivered that themselves?
Sure, thank you. So the ministries, the executive government ministries, can do their own procurements on under trade threshold amounts. And so that's for goods under 10,000, for services under 75,000, and for construction under 100,000. They are allowed to do their own procurements. Everything that has to be publicly procured has to come through the Ministry of SAS Builds and Procurement.
Thank you. Minister, could you explain why that property management subvote financing charges are down by $8 million this year compared to last year's budget?
Mark Kleefeld, Chief Financial Officer. So the reduction you're seeing is attributable entirely to just an accounting entry. So it's the PSAB Section 3160 that I think folks would have heard a fair bit about this year and last with respect to prior year P3 obligations. And so what had happened here was we are obligated to provide basically a financing expense against our P3 obligations. When the new PSAB regulations took place last year, we were required to book the expense actually at government's weighted average cost of capital as opposed to the cost of capital at the time that the liability was taken on. And so you would have to speak with finance officials to better understand the whole portfolio of debt. But given that that debt is, of any number of years, there's a wide variety of interest rates in there. So the weighted average cost of capital is in fact higher than government's cost of capital when those liabilities were taken on. So when PSAB affected new principles on how to account for this, basically we had to do a retroactive increase to cover expense in prior years. So that happened in the prior year budget. It falls off this year because these are expenses that happened in the old year. It reflects nothing with respect to the actual operating budget for operations moving forward.
Thanks so much. I'll focus a few questions here on procurement. Can you please advise on the rough percentage and dollar breakdown on a dollar basis of procurements that are through public tenders, sole source contracts, and other special arrangements in 23-24? So breaking down by way of dollar value and percentage.
So we don't have the hard numbers with us. What I would say is it's in limited cases. And there's two situations in which this would happen, just under trade thresholds and then emergency situations.
Would you be able to provide back to us the those amounts, Minister, back to this committee? It's not available here today to break down the dollar values for those that were procured through public tenders as opposed to sole source tenders or other special arrangements?
That's up to you.
So we don't have that record now. We'll take that under advisement. Thank you.
So as opposed to the percentages, so breaking down those tranches, are you able to share the total value of sole sourced contracts then to be more specific about one tranche of procurement there, Minister?
Yeah, thank you again for the question. Again, that's not information I have. One of the things to make clear, I guess, on this is that the very large majority of any of these would be sole sourced because they're under trade procurements, or under trade thresholds, sorry, which means that the ministries are not operating through our process necessarily, right? So it would be a ministry by ministry question to answer.
Right, okay, so then for SAS Builds itself, could you detail for SAS Builds how much was sole sourced?
Thank you. We don't have that number with us today, but we'll take that under advisement.
Okay, and Minister, is this information that you commit to getting back to the committee?
Oh, for sure.
Thanks so much. With respect to that tranche of sole source contracts, can you list all and any sole source contracts over $20 million that occurred in 23, 24, including the name of the company or the individual that won the contract, or that was awarded the contract, I should say?
We're not aware of any. We don't believe there's any, but that said, we'll look through our records and we'll get back to you. But as far as I know, there's nothing. As far as we know, there is none.
Thanks so much. Same question, but for threshold of 1 million to 20 million.
Okay. No, under the Ministry of SAS Builds, there's none that we know of. But again, like the other one, we'll check our records again, but nobody knows of any, but we'll look.
And under 1 million then? Anything under 1 million for SAS builds?
Turtle, well,
Thanks, and thanks for the time to discuss. Again, it's just not an item I have records with me on. For us, it's I would say there's some possibility that we have, particularly like emergency kind of procurements under that 1 million. So think of things like sort of our aviation services and that sort of thing. But we certainly are taking it under advisement that this would be a good record for us to maintain.
Sounds good. So there's a similar process if the minister is able to make sure this information is brought back to, or provided to the table again as well. What about if we're looking at the year ahead? Any budgeted plans on sole source contracts in the year ahead?
Short answer is no.
Would the minister describe a sole source contract as a commercial transaction? I guess if there was no market or no competition for the work being performed.
I mean,
So I guess the question, what I'm trying to get at here is, would you describe a sole source contract as a commercial transaction if there's no perceived to be no market for the work being performed? Maybe that's the justification for going with the one vendor.
To clarify the question, is it around the criteria by which an organization might end up sole sourcing, or about the definition of what sole sourcing itself?
A little bit more of the definition of what you would perceive as a commercial transaction. Maybe I would just flow into a second question here, and it would be, would you allow a company to place a confidentiality clause into a sole source contract when there's no other competition for that work, or it's suggested there's not other competition for that work? And the challenge, of course, is then if you have these clauses in something this, it reduces the public accountability. Okay. Two little teams going along here.
When does that wrap up?
June sometime.
Oh,
Yeah. Then take July off.
C10.
Just turning 10 right away, yeah. It's fun to watch because big ice, right?
They can just fly.
Yeah.
Good for skills training.
What's that?
Good for skills training.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's great. 3 or 4 players, special players. Oh, that's great. That's,
You see the fit.
that's wonderful. It's your son. That's awesome.
They had a lot of fun. Scored a goal.
Yeah.
They look exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
Built identically.
Yeah. No, he's taller than me back there. He's very long.
Speaking of long hair. That's that.
The hair jokes will start. Yeah, I'm shocked. He sounds like a word text.
Yeah. Who's your team?
Thanks.
Right.
Not cool, no, that's what I hope.
They sound like they need me.
I thought you liked the GM. I'm gonna coach you on that.
So thanks for the question. I think when we're thinking about this, the key distinction that we feel is really critical to make, that a sole source is not the same thing as when we have a competition and there's one bidder, right? And so we would have to carefully distinguish between those two things to kind of better dig into the question.
So in a sole sourced environment, then would you allow a company to place a confidentiality clause into a sole source contract? whether your ability to have accountability question as to whether or not they allow for them to be part of a sole source contract. I don't go any,
I won't be able to provide, a firm answer on that. And the reason being is that we would think that that's very context dependent and would really call for speculation. I think if we were faced with that situation, there's a lot of agreement on our side that we would look basically to the FOI guidelines for guidance on this. Typically things are excluded where there's commercially sensitive information, where there's proprietary information, where it could prejudice the economic interest of the province, something like that. So I do not have a hard and fast answer. We would make that judgment call at the moment, and we would look mostly, not exclusively, I think, but mostly at the FOI guidelines for how we would do that.
who has the final say on the award of a tender, the client, ministry, or SAS Builds and procurement?
Karen Cossett again. So it's the Chief Procurement Officer, or myself, and my division that review each procurement that is publicly procured, and we have the final say on the evaluation and the selection of that proponent. And then it would be the client ministry that actually awards the contract that would have to look at their budget. And so they do have an approval process to play, of course.
Thanks for that. Who has to approve a sole source contract, the client ministry or SAS Builds and Procurement?
Good afternoon. Denise Mutza, Deputy Minister of SAS Builds and Procurement. So with regard to your question, each ministry is responsible for determining the authority they need to sole source a contract.
Who at Sask Builds has the authority to approve a sole sourced contract?
Hi, Denise Mutza, Deputy Minister of SAS Builds and Procurement again. So in respect to SAS Builds, the ultimate authority rests with me, the Deputy Minister, but depending on the situation, depending on the contract, and the particulars, authority can be delegated downwards to other levels of the ministry. Ultimately, the delegation of authority is set out along the guidelines of the FAM manual.
Thanks for that. Does the Minister of SAS Builds and Procurement have to approve sole source or special arrangement contracts or contract processes?
The minister does not grant approval for procurements.
So what about the ministry? Is the ministry, is the approval of the Ministry of SAS Builds required?
for the granting of procurements of other ministries or the Ministry of Saskville?
For any sole source contracts of other ministries as well, where
So, oh, I don't have to hit that, sorry. I will stop touching buttons. It's Karen Cossett, and, sorry, the answer is no, we really don't.
so a ministry could proceed with a sole source contract. You may have been involved at the process, but SAS Builds itself doesn't have to grant approval for them to proceed.
So for sole sources for other ministries, we can provide advice and assistance. And so SAS Builds, the ministry can provide that advice, but ultimately the sole source contract and decision is with the ministry.
Has SAS Builds and Procurement been involved in any processes regarding contracts in 23-24 that have specific requirements with respect to Northern or Indigenous ownership? And if so, can you please list them, including the ministry involved and the specific requirement?
They call it that EBMP program. Do they call it, operators call it EBMP? No, I don't really know. Yeah, E-bump, right? Like
These are, though, the estimates for 24, 25. You missed it by a year. 23, 24 is not up for debate on the estimates for 24, 25.
Fair enough. Can you just apply that same question to the current budget year? Has SAS Builds and Procurement been involved, or will you be involved in processes that you're aware of for contracts that have specific requirements with respect to Northern Indigenous ownership? And then if so, just specify the ministry in the contract.
fair ruling.
What kind of trees are the
Not too many maple, pine, spruce, buckthorn. Just like shelter belt stuff, just to get some stuff, just get a bit of stuff established around some perimeters. Yeah.
Buckthorn is nice.
Yeah.
That stuff. Just like in Russia, that's the most popular tea.
Is that right, eh? Yeah, oh, that's good, yeah.
It's good. It's supposed to be something super.
I put tons of buffalo berries in as well over the years, I like them as well.
We probably got 2 to 3 miles, 3 miles of buckthorn.
That's great.
Shelter.
They're pretty durable.
Super.
Yeah.
Suckers, right?
Right.
And it'll spread all over the place.
Get cut.
Yeah, well, cutting it seems to liven it up a bit.
Sure.
But, doesn't like tillage or anything.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
it's good stuff.
I feel like that's a problem I'll deal with.
What's that?
That's a problem I'll deal with 30 years from now or something.
Yeah. Wildlife love,
Yeah.
like reed.
Same with buffalo berry.
I'll just maybe jump in here. I just want to remind Minister and the opposition member and all members and officials. So we're dealing specifically with the supplementary estimates for 23-24. Supplementary estimates are very, very specific to the topics, office equipment and information technology, remediation of contaminated sites, land, buildings, and improvements. And I think the minister and the member have worked it out themselves, but I just wanted to reiterate. And 24-25 estimates are a wider scope as well. So very good. Continue, Minister.
So we have a number of projects in northern Saskatchewan that have an impact on the Indigenous community. You know, there are a number of schools that are happening in northern Saskatchewan. There's a number of projects in Larange, like the Larange LTC, the Larange Healthcare Center.
More specifically, requirements with respect to northern or Indigenous ownership as part of a requirement for procurement.
Thank you. At this time, we're not aware of any procurements that require Indigenous ownership as part of that process, but having said that, there are a number of instances that we could probably point to that have Indigenous aspect to the subcontracts they would use to carry out their procurement obligations.
Could you list those? So I guess ownership or labor, kind of a northern or Indigenous ownership or labor. Do you want to list those procurements?
Hi. Sarah Nichols, Assistant Deputy Minister of Infrastructure Design and Delivery. As part of the answer to your question, I wanted to speak to some of the efforts we make on our major project delivery. So in terms of our major projects, while we work typically as government with the general contractors, we work to encourage that engagement between the general contractors and the local communities that they serve, including with Indigenous and northern communities like in our projects in La Ronge. And so we encourage that and facilitate that by hosting, community sessions as we're working with the general contractors. And we look at value-added benefits to a project, including community engagement. It's not a scored item, but it is an item that we encourage in all of our major infrastructure projects.
Okay. So are you aware of any contracts that have specific requirements for Indigenous labor or ownership?
Sarah Nichols. We would encourage that, and it's not a minimum criteria in the performance of the contract, but it's something that we've asked to get information on as we're launching some of our major projects.
We'll move along a bit to the, I don't know if it's referred to as the E-bump, is it E-bump or EBMP? What's the proper way to talk? What, E-bump or?
E-bump.
E-bump, that's what I thought, yeah. And I felt funny if I was maybe calling it. Can you explain what the E-bump system is, including the functions that it provides and which parts of government will be using the system, and also which ministry is responsible for the E-bump system?
Someone said you were delivering butter tarts. I worked so hard on the weekend, I didn't know time was. When is it? Oh, up there? I should go. Hey, Fred, always coming up with May 9th.
Good afternoon. Brittany Shatta, the Assistant Deputy Minister and Executive Project Sponsor for the Enterprise Business Modernization Project, or eBump. So a bit about what eBump is. eBump will implement a new government-wide cloud-based IT solution for an integrated financial, human resource, and supply chain management system. It will provide better services, including increased automation and efficiency for users of financial, human resource, and supply chain services. The new system will replace more than 60 systems that we use today to provide those back office services. Many of these are reaching their end of life and will require millions of dollars in investment to maintain. Having these numerous business systems means that significant manual processes are being used to support those human resource, finance, and procurement areas. So while this is an enterprise project that will impact all of government, the most impacted are the 5 partner ministries. So SAS Builds and Procurement provides the central coordination for the project, and the other partner ministries are Corrections, Policing and Public Safety, Finance, Highways, and the Public Service Commission.
Perfect. When was the eBump system approved for development, and is the e-bump project now completed, with the exception of, future development to it?
Are you going up, Chevy? Are you going up for that? You and I should drive up together. Okay. Yeah. Chevy and I are gonna come up maybe together, May 9th. Together? Together. We're gonna pick up squirrel path.
Are you still out running much?
Yeah, every day.
Kenny Mason McKay,
Sorry?
41 years old. He just ran 2:03 at the London Marathon.
That's wild. Who did that?
Kenny Mason McKay, greatest long distance runner of all time.
I was still impressed with young Bradshaw out at the Boston
know.
Marathon last week.
That's crazy. That's amazing. They're gonna do a father-son race next year.
Well, if it was short,
Yeah.
very short. Really short. With a butter tart at the end of it.
Morgan's gonna push him in a stroke.
I think Fred's actually explosive off the line. I've seen him. I think he'll have him for the first few strides. I think you'd have him. Well, there were 24 people there from Saskatchewan. He was third of 24. That's amazing.
We tried doing the 2:03 race for 400 meters,
Right. Yeah.
let alone
Yeah.
for 26 miles.
You said that heartbreak hill that they've got there, like it's right at the end of the race.
So the project was originally approved in October of 2020, and currently the core system build is complete, and we are currently testing in the project right now.
How much capital funding has been spent on the e-bump system, including software and specialized hardware, to date?
Training in Oregon this week. So working hard.
So thanks for the question. As of February, we spent $42.7 million on the project in 23-24.
And what's the total to date on the project? And then what funding is budgeted for the year ahead?
How's your daughter doing, Mac?
Yeah, the same Ken, she, did a lifting training this week, off of blocks. She did a jerk 322 pounds. Can you imagine? If she does that in a competition, it'll be a world record. So.
She will, if she's done it once.
Yeah. Yeah, 322 pounds. Yeah.
Imagine if you were conservative with a positive mindset.
What's that?
If you were conservative and had a positive mindset.
Imagine, eh? Imagine. How do you know she's not conservative?
I don't. Now, see, there you go. I assumed her.
So as of February, the capital spend to date for the project to design and implement the system is $76.4 million. And for 24-25, the capital budget for eBump is $64.35 million.
Do you know the capital requirements beyond that to get it to completion?
When's our next international?
Later in May. Youth Worlds.
Hopefully she'll do it there.
What's that?
That'd be good if she can do it there.
That would be good. Just trying to, well, let's see. She's ranked number 1 for that one, so she just needs to have like a good day to win.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. She's got another one in the fall. That's where she wants to break the record. But we'll see.
Again.
Yeah, but that's what I think. Like,
Yeah.
give yourself 2 cracks at it, but
Yeah.
she doesn't take advice from me. She might be conservative after all.
She could be. That's why she's doing true. True.
Yeah, all that travel, you know.
That's amazing. That's
Bring her
amazing.
into the house. Bring her into the house. Yeah, we let her in the house. Have you been in the house? Yeah. Yeah, not your house, but the house.
Introduce you?
Yeah. That's pretty spectacular. I know, that's spectacular. I know. Yeah, we're proud of her.
Can I get your dad, but?
I did a memory statement when I went to a couple, I've mentioned a couple times in
Yeah, I
policy,
know.
budget responsibility.
That's where it's heard, though.
I don't know if she was there though for
I
that.
think so.
She's been there, I'm just trying to think. I'll bring her down.
Will you bring her and introduce us?
Yeah.
Yeah. When she wins.
Yeah, that's a pretty.
That's
amazing.
pretty. I want to see her press so well back.
Oh,
Yeah.
easy. One arm.
How many? How many?
Yeah. Well, how many of you make up 322 pounds?
It's about 2.2.
That's like Cheeto back in the day.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Can you imagine he is 100 pounds heavier?
Yeah. I can. I've seen the transformation.
So thanks for the question. We cannot speculate on the future year budgets, and the amount of capital will be dependent on the activities and deliverables of the project this year.
Which companies were involved in the development of the eBump system, from proposal or concept development to the purchase of software to the development of the system and integration with other government systems and software? And then I guess to that, how are the services of each company procured, sole source, public tender, or some type of special procurement process? Just please explain the special procurement that was used, if that's the case.
That's what you guys need to do. You need to.
What's that?
You need to, between the two of you, buy a 4-H steer.
Yeah.
Fill up your freezers.
Yeah.
The kids are out looking right now for people to buy.
Yeah, no, I've thought of doing it that way, off the board, producers, but.
Like, I swear that's the best youth program.
Yeah,
agreed.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just looking for, right now they're all looking for people, so.
Yeah.
I donate all of my bottles, cans, plastic. You got one care service. I bag them
So the government of Saskatchewan procured Deloitte, whose consortium includes Paradigm and Plato Sask testing, to provide business transformation and system integrator services for the project.
Thanks so much. And do you know how much each company's been paid to date for their work on eBump?
So it wasn't quite like a quarter or so, or anything like that. Yeah, it's kind of small, but, that's a nice ground. Ground, this way, like fresh.
So as of February, the amount paid to Deloitte to date for the project to design and implement the system has been $64.9 million. We're not privy to what amount of that would be to their consortium partners. And I know you asked a question about kind of the procurement of that, so I'd invite Karen up to speak more specifically to that.
So Karen Cossett again. So my division, the Procurement Management Division, was involved in the Business Transformation, Advisory, and Systems Integrator Services procurement called eBump. It was procured, originally we put it out for public procurement in June of 2020. We went through proponent conferences in July. In July, we also had a deadline for questions and addendums were issued. We closed the competition in August and went into evaluations. And the proponent, Deloitte, was selected in September of 2020. We had an independent third-party fairness advisor throughout the process to make sure that it was fair and transparent. We had 5 proponents that provided submissions, and it was Deloitte that was the best valued procurement proponent at that time.
Okay, thanks for that information. I don't have a great tech background. I'm pretty good with Commodore 64, and like PowerPoint is still. But I was wondering, does the eBump system use similar or same software as the AIM system in health? I just learned that PowerPoint, you don't call it that anymore.
They were making fun of me on the weekend. We were gonna make a PowerPoint on some things that they were telling me that I, showing my illiteracy. Just on myself. Same thing with Excel.
So thanks. I would defer any of the questions about Ames to the Ministry of Health.
Okay. And do you know if so you don't know whether the similar software?
Yeah. Defer to them to speak to their technology.
Okay. Well, again, I'm no tech expert over here either, so I'm not sure that I could assess the answers coming in. Maybe shifting along a bit to health, of course, there's been some discussion about recently the government's awarded a contract, $6 million with a private surgery clinic in Calgary called Surgical Centers, Inc., a division of ClearPoint Health Network, regarding hips and knees. Was the contract, I guess, could you describe the procurement process for that sole source contract? And then if you could describe how you determined fair value.
Karen Cossett again. So the Ministry of Health consulted with myself and my division in January of 2023 regarding the strategy to send Saskatchewan patients to Calgary for a limited temporary program, which is set to expire in September of 2024, as per the Relief for Long Waiting Joint Replacement Patients Regulations. At that time, we looked at their business plan and what they had done. We advised that they were actually exempt from trade agreements. And so health services, if you look up New West Trade Partnership Agreement, is an exemption. And that's, you can find that on SAS tenders. We have a knowledge warehouse, and our trade policy unit actually provides that information. So that was some of our advice that we had provided. Even though we provided that, we wanted to make sure that it was a fair and transparent process. That is why we do a lot of health procurement services, even though it is exempt. So we looked to see what their business plan was. Due to the interim and urgent nature of the agreement, we felt like it supported their rationale. Emergency purchases are also exempt. So if an act or nature causes, an immediate acquisition for the service, so there was a need for that. As well, the Ministry of Health let us know that they had contacted private surgical providers across Western Canada to gauge interest, capability, and capacity to provide that, and there was no Saskatchewan respondents. So of the firms that responded, it was only ClearPoint Health that indicated that they were capable. They had also let us know that they had publicly announced that they were going out for out-of-province surgery. So given all of that information, that it was their intention to proceed with hip and knee surgery replacement, and the urgency to proceed due to significant backlog of patients waiting for surgery as a result of COVID-19 slowdown and long wait times, as well as the interim nature, we had advised that we thought that was acceptable. But again, I would just reiterate that it was our advice.
How did the price compare to the price of the same surgery within the Saskatchewan healthcare system?
So the Ministry of Health would have conducted that evaluation, and I don't actually have that information, so that would have to be an ask of the Ministry of Health.
How many surgeries does this contract allow for or provide for?
So I would just say that we provided advice on the procurement, and we don't actually have the numbers for that.
Could you commit to providing that back to the committee?
From Health, the Ministry of Health.
Would you be able to play a role in communicating with Health to report back on that procurement?
We don't have that mandate to be able to do that from health. And so I can't provide that assessment, but they would have the numbers on that contract. We just give them the advice on the contract's ability.
We'll follow up there. With respect
I'll
to...
just jump in there too, and the member knows he could arrange for a written question to be asked. I think Health has finished their time allotted, but yeah, up to you. Thanks.
Thank you. With respect to highways, were all contracts awarded in 23-24 awarded through a regular process of advertising the work to be completed with a full set of work specs, inviting bids, qualifying the bidders, and then awarding the contract to the low bidder?
course, that's in relation again to 23-24, not 24-25.
Is the minister, with respect to highways, for budgets that will flow from this fiscal year, is he aware, or could he speak to contracts that were awarded that through a, were they all awarded through a regular process of advertising the work to be completed? Same question, work specs, inviting bids, qualifying the bidders, and then awarding the contract to the low bidder.
So this is Karen Cossett, and I would say for the procurements that we're involved in on behalf of the Ministry of Highways, the procurements are awarded as per best value. So they use best value procurement, not just low bid, and that would be standard practice for how those are procured and awarded.
Just want to get a little bit of a sense of, obviously the Prince Albert Hospital is so important to the community. We've long advocated for it, as the minister knows. I know the minister has long advocated for that hospital. He knows the community. But the cost has just gone through the roof, right, in the procurement here. And, you know, I think the original projection for the cost of the hospital, you know, was identified early on. Government spoke to it kind of back in 2020. So just, you know, 4 years ago, to the tune of $200 million. And, you know, then I see in 2023, I'd ask the minister just to maybe, I guess the project then had increased at that point from 200 to had been 300. So it's sort of a 50% increase in that period of time. But now we're talking $200 million to $1 billion, right? So 5 times or 500% increase over just 4 years. So I guess I'd like the minister to break out what sort of inflationary pressures we're dealing with on the procurement of that hospital. You know, and if you look at the construction industry, I think if specific to that same period, 2017 to now, the increase has been a 41% increase that I see from Stats Canada. So I guess my question is, how do you square this? Because 41% is large, for sure, but we're talking 500% here. So what do you account for the other 460% increase from the original budget?
Thank you. Sarah Nichols. Thank you for your question about costs on the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital project. I'm going to answer with information about three important components related to that cost. As you know, the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital project includes a new multi-level acute care tower connected to and directly north of the existing facility. The tower features a helipad on the roof, an expanded emergency department, larger modern operating rooms, adult intensive care, adult mental health, perioperative services, pediatrics, maternity services, neonatal intensive care, and medical imaging, including MRI and second CT scanner, as well as First Nations and Métis cultural space, among other key services. The new tower will have 168 new beds, while overall capacity in the facility will increase from 173 to 242. Procurement competition, accurate cost estimating, and effective contract management are three areas of continued focus for SaskBuilds and procurement, in particular on this project. First, the competition process used by the Government of Saskatchewan aims to get best value for Saskatchewan while enhancing access, competition, and fairness. Second, cost estimating helps the government determine if a project is feasible and affordable. And finally, SaskBuilds and Procurement's contract management approach extracts the value from each agreement. The three areas assist SaskBuilds and Procurement in providing the greatest benefit to Saskatchewan for each capital investment. In relation to procurement competition, during the height of the COVID-19, contractors across Saskatchewan and Canada became very selective in which projects they were pursuing due to the amount of available work, unprecedented cost escalation, and labor shortages. Saskatchewan, like the rest of Canada, experienced changing attitudes from industry about risk allocation in common models used to deliver infrastructure. Contractors became increasingly unwilling to own risks related to cost escalation and the supply chain. Very quickly, the appetite to engage in fixed-priced, fixed-date delivery models diminished. In terms of the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital, a request for qualifications was publicly issued in December 2021 to all parties interested in leading the design and construction of the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital. A single team demonstrated that they met the requirements and was shortlisted to move on to the next stage of procurement. Saskatchewan was not alone to receive lower than expected bidders on active major healthcare projects. Provinces such as British Columbia and Ontario also reacted to procurements with single bidders. SaskBuilds and Procurements utilized the lessons learned and processes utilized in British Columbia and Ontario in implementing a modified request for proposals competition for the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital in response to those market conditions. A modified RFP is a competitive process in which a shortlisted proponent develops and submits a design and a series of proposals to demonstrate how it will meet the project's requirements. The shortlisted proponent's bids are assessed against a shadow bid developed by an independent cost consultant to assess value and validate current market conditions. In the case of the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital project, the independent cost consultant reviewed PCL's financial submission and found that the cost was reasonable and appropriate. In order to determine how SaskBuilds and Procurement delivers a project, we use a procurement options analysis methodology to identify the most appropriate procurement option. Think of this like picking the right tool for a job. The options analysis assesses the benefits and risks for a project and identifies a procurement option that is best positioned to achieve the desired outcomes and objectives. In many cases, SaskBuilds and Procurement will deliver a project through a design bid build, which is a widespread model in which a designer and builder are contracted independently and the project phases occur sequentially. In other cases, SaskBuilds and Procurement may utilize construction management. In this model, SaskBuilds and Procurement will hire a construction manager based on experience and qualifications to oversee a project from design to construction closeout. Some projects are better suited to alternative delivery models such as design build or progressive design build, as we used in the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital projects. In these projects, a designer and builder work together under a single contract to deliver the project. Another key factor in this question is around cost estimating. Unprecedented times in the construction industry created affordability challenges for public infrastructure across Saskatchewan, Canada, and the world. Cost estimates produced prior to or throughout the global pandemic could not predict the inflation and cost escalation later experienced. Construction costs have risen dramatically due to soaring inflation and interest rates, COVID-19 delays, and supply chain disruptions and labor shortages. The record level of private investment in the province has also impacted construction costs. While it's good news that Saskatchewan ranks second amongst provinces for private capital investment in 2023 and is expected to rank first in 2024, the continued investments such as BHP's continued investment in the Jansen mine and expansions in canola crush across Saskatchewan are raising the demand for contractors, materials, and labor. Increased costs underscore the need for accurate cost estimating. Although cost estimates forecast in the future, they reflect the economic realities at a point in time. Cost estimating occurs across multiple stages throughout a project's life cycle. In the beginning stages of a project, an order of magnitude estimate is developed based on assumptions, past projects, and historical information. As a project advances and detailed requirements become known, the level of detail and the accuracy of the forecast increases. At these stages, Saskatchewan and Procurement utilizes the expertise of professional cost estimators. This
is all such good information. I'm just so cognizant. So we're talking about big budget item, and we have 10 minutes left in committee. You're providing such good information. So it's sort of how do we suss through, getting a bit of the. So 41% is what Stats Canada says is the inflation over that same period for non-residential construction. You're identifying that there are extenuating circumstances for Saskatchewan that's driven that inflation rate higher. Is that supported by Stats Canada? Has the inflation rate, what's the inflation rate in Saskatchewan through that same period of time? We've seen 41% from Stats Canada. Do you have a different number? Of course, what we're looking at here is 500% increase.
Where's my?
I'll just remind committee members we've got about 7 minutes left here as we're waiting for the answers.
As part of that, you're coming with a response, which I appreciate. You're reading from a document before. I'm just checking with the minister if it would be appropriate to, because there's substantive information, I'm sure there, if it would be appropriate to table that document. Okay, that's fair.
Concise answers won't take long.
Thank you. Sarah Nichols. In terms of Statistics Canada comparisons that you spoke of, I also want to draw the attention that the cost of concrete alone has increased 30% since 2020, and the cost of steel are really driving project at an increase of 80% since 2020, and those are also Stats Canada results. But I think it's important also to look at the estimate, and so that $300 million number that you spoke of, that was announced as government's commitment of at least $300 million to the project. That was an order of magnitude. Since the project was announced, additional professional cost estimates have been completed as the requirements of the project were figured out. In terms of getting value for Saskatchewan, which I think your question is how do we determine if our price is fair? We also look to other jurisdictions and what their price was. And so while healthcare facilities, in particular a large hospital, are very complex facilities and they differ in terms of the services that they deliver, so they're not a perfect comparison. We have compared against similar facilities recently announced in Manitoba, BC, and Ontario. The cost per square foot on the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital expansion is $2,044 a square foot. Recent projects announced in Manitoba, BC, and Ontario are between $2,700 and $3,800 a square foot. The rising costs and the dramatic rising costs that we're speaking of are more pronounced in the more complex infrastructure. So a large hospital project is going to see more complexity than some of the other types of infrastructure. And so we wanted to do that analysis to compare, to make sure that we could understand whether the price was fair. I spoke earlier also of the independent cost consultant. An independent cost consultant has reviewed the entire submission and given the opinion that the price was fair and reasonable.
And I know with time, I want to. It's a fairly big subject area. We probably could have used a fair amount more time on it, even to get a better understanding of what that complex infrastructure is specifically. Like what are we talking about now? In a hospital that's not there in a school, for example, because certainly steel and cement and these are used everywhere. One last question before I turn it over to my colleague for a couple questions on education. Who is the independent cost? Who provided that service? Chevy's given us an extra 15.
And ask him questions about the schools and his constituency, so I'm sure he's interested in hearing my questions.
Can't draw the chair
Bring
into
him into
debate,
the debate, yeah.
Just Dana.
Too bad it'll be off the record.
Hi. The independent cost consultant was SSA Quantity Surveyors Lit. It was retained as a professional quantity surveyor to benchmark construction costs and validate estimates on major capital projects while ensuring the Government of Saskatchewan maintains negotiating leverage throughout the progressive design phase.
Thanks. Who are they and where are they located? We can do that research because I want to get a couple education questions here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Minister, I have two questions. So for the sake of time, looking to see if you can table the answer to my first question. In your opening comments, you mentioned $8.8 million in this budget to support planning for 9 new schools and 2 renos. Would you be willing to table how much of that 8.8 is designated for each of those projects, as well as what the estimated start date is for work, and then the estimated timeline for opening of those projects?
I'll give you what I can here.
The Ministry of Education would have to provide the breakdown of the budget numbers under the 8.8, but I can answer that from the initial announcement, typically a new school takes approximately 4 years. Planning and land acquisition, design, construction takes 24 months, and then there's typically a move-in period.
Okay, I've got one final question. Minister, we talked about the increasing costs for concrete and steel that's impacting announcements for hospital builds. Of course, that impacts education as well. I'm hearing from school boards that due to inflation, the cost of new builds, the market value puts that somewhere between $4,700 to $5,000 per square meter, but that school divisions have been asked to engage in designing buildings at $4,100 per square meter. In your estimation, can you explain the difference between the market value and what schools are asked to design at, and as well as how school boards are expected to make up that difference?
That's not 500% inflation. If you guys had close many, is that, if you had close many hospitals? You guys can't even keep staff from the ones we have. Good thing you guys closed 176. Come on. Good chair. Very much a very good chair. Fair, tough. Who's your, who do you think's the best chair? Guys good? You don't tell me. Yeah. So it's not him. He's good, eh? Who's toughest to deal with? I know who. No, I know who. I know who. We won't say. We know which one. You can ask a janitorial. Who's the best you stand up?
Our ministry recognizes that in some cases there have been affordability challenges leading to difficult decisions on major education projects. Through that, we've maintained strong partnerships with the Ministry of Education and School Division, allowing us to work collaboratively in managing and finding solutions to those pressures.
Thank you. Having reached our agreed upon time for consideration of Sask Builds, we will adjourn consideration of these estimates. I'd ask the minister if you have any closing comments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the members of the committee on both sides of the aisles here, and my team of people, extremely valuable, talented people from Sask Builds. Of course, the people up in the booth up there, our hands are always the best, and we appreciate that. And you, Mr. Chair, thanks for doing your job.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Weatherspoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thought you were tough but fair and always dapper, looking sharp. I want to say thanks to the table, of course, and Hansard, but thanks to the minister for the time tonight. Importantly, thanks to all the officials that have joined us here, all those that are involved in this important work across the province. We probably could have allocated a little more time for these considerations. Sorry if we rushed along a couple of the responses. Thanks to everyone, and thanks as well for the undertaking to provide information back on a few different fronts. But thanks for all the work everyone's involved in.
All right, that concludes our business for today. I would ask a member to move a motion of adjournment. Mr. Bonk has moved. All agreed? Carried. This committee stands adjourned until Wednesday, April 24th at 3:30 p.m. Thanks, everyone.